My Lord and my God, I firmly believe that you are here, that you see me, that you hear me. I adore you with profound reverence. I ask you for pardon of my sins and grace to make this time of prayer fruitful. My Mother Immaculate, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me. Today's Gospel is 3 different sayings of Jesus, which in one sense don't look like they have much of a connection with each other. But if we look deeper, we see that there is a connection. At least we can imagine a connection between these 3 different sayings. And that is that we can apply what Jesus says to the Eucharist. The first of these 3 sayings is this. Jesus said to his disciples, "Do not give dogs what is holy, and do not throw your pearls in front of pigs, or they may trample them and then turn on you and tear you to pieces." So Jesus is saying here, if you have pearls, precious pearls, well, you don't throw them in front of pigs, or just throw them in the rubbish bin, or not recognize what they are holy things. He says in general, you don't give them to dogs. And remember, dogs for the Jews were quite the opposite of holy. They were seen as very unclean. So that is a question of recognizing our treasures. Do we recognize the Eucharist as a great treasure? Not just recognize, but treat Jesus in the Eucharist as a great treasure. I remember a couple of years ago, I was visiting Toledo, that wonderful town in the center of Spain. And a priest who was one of the canons of the famous Cathedral of Toledo was very kindly leading me around. And he brought me to the main tabernacle of the cathedral, which was built during the 1600s. At least the tabernacle, I think, was built in the 1600s. And he opened the door of the tabernacle. There's something that not many people, I think, got an opportunity to see the opened tabernacle door. And inside the tabernacle door, on the inside, as in facing Jesus in the ciborium, the little container containing Jesus, the inside of the door was just covered with pearls. There must have been hundreds of pearls encrusted in the inside of the door. And of course, when you close the door, nobody sees them. And very few people, I would say, know that there are so many pearls on the inside of the door of the cathedral tabernacle. Now, a couple of more people too, because you've heard it. But it was a beautiful statement by the builders of the cathedral back in the 16th century, whenever it was, that they wanted to reverence our Lord in the tabernacle so much that they put the pearls inside the door, not on the outside. A real statement of, this is our treasure. Jesus is our treasure. And therefore, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Our heart is on the inside of the tabernacle. Jesus does say that. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. What is my heart with Jesus? Not just my heart, actually, because my body too. Like when we might visit him in the Blessed Sacrament. Or really, we might say, maybe where my body is, it's never with Jesus. It's always looking after my health, my career, my car, my phone, my entertainment. They might be my real treasures if we're going to be sincere, Lord, because that's where I spend all of my time, and neither my heart nor my body is very often in front of you in the tabernacle. Well, let's try to realize Jesus saying, recognize your treasures. Recognize this wonderful treasure that Jesus has given us. The second line of today's three sayings. So also treat others as you would like them to treat you. That is the meaning of the law and the prophets. So from that we clearly think, well, yeah, treat others, your family, your friends, your colleagues, treat them as you would like them to treat you. Be considerate, kind, generous with them. But it's funny, when we think of that, others, my family, my friends, colleagues, random strangers even, but sometimes we don't even include Jesus there. In other words, we know he is God. We know he is in the tabernacle. And yet, if a family member were locked inside a tabernacle, or a good friend was locked inside the tabernacle and couldn't get out, somehow could survive, well, you'd visit them often, perhaps many times a day actually, but you'd certainly visit them and say, look, I'm kind of sorry that you're stuck inside that tabernacle, that metal box, and at least I'm going to spend a couple of minutes here keeping you company so that you don't feel so alone. It's kind of funny that, I would like that. Certainly if I were stuck inside a big metal box, I would like others to visit me and spend a little time and tell me what was happening outside. But we don't do that with Jesus. And it even happens in the gospel. Our Lord is visiting the house of a wealthy Pharisee. And this man who has him as a guest actually doesn't wash his feet, doesn't prepare him before the meal, which would be normal. The normal thing, not the man himself, but one of the servants would prepare him and wash his feet. But this guy was saying, well, it's Jesus. Somehow he doesn't count. Well, funny, not just him, but sometimes we say that. It's only Jesus. Somehow he doesn't count. He's there in that metal box, almost like a prisoner, and yet he kind of doesn't count. So, Lord, I really do want to treat you in the tabernacle as I would like to be treated if I were stuck in a metal box. Third little saying, enter by the narrow gate, since the road that leads to perdition is wide and spacious, and many take it, but it is a narrow gate and a hard road that leads to life, and only a few find it. The narrow gate that leads us to heaven. I'm not going to look at the fact that Jesus says very few find this hard road and this narrow gate. But I think we can see that Jesus is the gate. Jesus is the way, this road, hard road maybe not, but a road certainly, that begins here on earth. And it leads all the way directly, kind of non-stop, to heaven. And it's a very important thing, I think, for us to recognize that as the church says, the Eucharist is a foretaste of heaven. In other words, when we're with our Lord for example, praying before the tabernacle, receiving him in Holy Communion, in a kind of way, we are already in heaven. We're getting a little taste of heaven. Not always that we can feel emotionally, but sometimes, yes, that we can feel emotionally. I like to think of Martha and Mary, that famous incident where Mary, you remember Martha and Mary and Lazarus, the three siblings, and that house in Bethany that Jesus loved to spend time there and visit, and he was so well looked after. On one occasion he's visiting, and Mary is praying before him. Actually, she's there at his feet listening to him. Martha is preparing the meal inside the kitchen. And anyway, it leads to a little bit of a brief falling out between the two sisters. But I like to think that Mary is in heaven for that maybe half hour at the feet of Jesus. Martha is in the kitchen. She's kind of in purgatory. And she doesn't recognize that this is a moment that Jesus wants to give her of like a little experience of heaven. And you and I should have these little moments of heaven before Jesus For example, in the Corpus Christi processions that we had, the beginning of the month, times of prayer in front of the Blessed Sacrament, a beautiful Mass, beautiful celebrations, Eucharistic celebrations. I think they're a little moment of heaven. And then when we're on that, in experience that moment, now I'm on this road. Just continue following this Eucharistic road, if you like, and this leads me all the way to heaven. I give you thanks, my God, for the good resolutions, affections, and inspirations you have communicated to me in this meditation. I ask you for help to put them into effect. My Mother Immaculate, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me.